I've been Dynamo longer in my life than I've been Steven, and suddenly, who am I?
It's one in probably a billion that you are then going to become one of the most successful magicians on the planet.
When I was performing as Dynamo and I was on that ascension and it was going from strength to strength to strength, it almost was like too much goodness that I just wasn't used to. Found myself in this incredibly fortunate position and I didn't know what to do with it. My ultimate rock bottom, the end of 2020, tried to take my own life. Seeing the support that people gave me, even people that didn't know me, that was like a different type of magic that I'd never really felt before.
Hello, Stephen.
How you doing?
I'm really good. We haven't seen each other for 4 years? It was 2020 that you came on the podcast last, and I haven't seen you since.
Yeah, I mean, literally straight after the podcast, I got COVID.
Yeah.
And yeah, that kind of wiped me out for a bit. And then I kind of disappeared for a while myself as well, whilst I was having to find new medications to help with my illness. So
yeah, I mean, we've got so much to catch up on. You've had many health issues since then. You had a bad bout of Crohn's that was brought on by food poisoning, right?
Yes, yeah, Campylobacter food poisoning, which caused my Crohn's to spread to a different part of my bowel. And that came with a whole new set of side effects and new challenges to try and face. But, I'm come out the other side. I still have bad days, but I've more good than bad. So that's all I can ask for, really.
Yeah, I mean, you are this amazingly resilient being that seems to bounce back from setbacks almost constantly. And that we can kind of root that back to childhood even. But even with this last bout of illness, it was extreme. You had arthritis was one of the symptoms from this bout of Crohn's. And then that impacted your mental health because you weren't as able to do the things that you love, obviously. Would you say that was your rock bottom, the lowest place you've been to mentally?
I think it got worse than that. My ultimate rock bottom was in the end of 2020. I actually, I tried to take my own life. So, I mean, it didn't really get much lower than that. But thankfully, my wife found me and, helped me get the help I needed. And 5 years later, and here we are.
Yeah,
and I'm definitely in a happy place. So this is the perfect place to share some stories of magic and wonder and all the exciting things that I've kind of been working on that's keeping me going.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's incredible to see you thriving and doing what you do best and making many people happy with your magic and doing shows and making TV. But it is obviously a long journey to go from that level of rock bottom, like you say, actually attempting to take your own life, to now sitting here feeling good and buoyed up and physically better. I know it's not a linear path. I know there's not one trick or quick fix to go from feeling that desperate and awful to where you're at now. But what would you say have been the key things that have helped you get to where you are now?
Ultimately, I think it boils down to great people around me. I mentioned my wife, my doctors, the therapist, and also my friends. And I think also people that I have never met before, but taking a step back and kind of looking at the world and kind of seeing the support that people gave me, even people that didn't know me, the support that they gave me, that was like a different type of magic that I'd never really felt before. I think I'd spent so many years focused on the magic that I do and focused on trying to basically be as good as I can be at what I do. And then when suddenly I was not able to do that, it forced me to open my eyes to the magic around me, and seeing all that support, that changed everything. And I realised that I wasn't alone in this. And I also realised that it's not about the magic I do, it's about the magic that is happening in the background, in the world, like the doctors of the NHS, like what they do. It's so easy for you as a person to help somebody else brighten up their day, and that moment can change everything for them. And I've felt that myself. So it's rejuvenated my love for life.
How amazing. I mean, it is those tiny little moments, tiny little connections with other people that I think do save lives. And, I didn't try and take my own life, but I was very, very depressed, over 10 years ago. And it was really two people that I will thank forever, that they didn't even do anything necessarily specific or special, but I absolutely knew they weren't judging me and they were there for me. And there was just something about that transaction with those two individuals who weren't even actually my sort of best friends at the time, but they really, I think, sort of pushed past awkwardness and potential pushback from me to make sure they were properly checking in with me, and I knew they were there for me. And it is those little connections that can be life-changing completely.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I think you mentioned it there, but connections in general.
Yeah.
And I think often when we lose ourselves, it's because we lose a lack of connection with the world or with the people in it, and we feel that it's impossible to get that connection back. But I think one of the things I realised is that everybody in one way, shape or form feels that lack of connection on a day-to-day basis. And I think there's nothing wrong with like reaching out and, asking someone for help or asking someone how they're doing if you see them not looking the best, because sometimes they just are waiting for someone to kind of come and give them a helping hand.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's always worth, if you're sort of thinking, should I check in with that person? Should I ask? Is it any of my business? I think it's always worth making sure and just checking with someone that they're okay, or pushing that bit harder if you're sort of assuming something's not quite right. Did you know that you were on a slippery slope mentally before that? Or was it one of those moments where you're like, snap decision out of the blue, I don't want to be here anymore?
I think it was a combination of, first off, my Crohn's got so bad that every single day I was just in so much pain. Even today, every morning I wake up and for the first hour and a half, I'm in discomfort. And I take my medication and slowly it kicks in. I do my treatments and, give me a couple hours and I feel like ready to face the world. But every single day, it's a challenge. So I think having the illness got so bad that I didn't want to face that anymore. I couldn't see the positives in being around to put myself through that difficult time to get to the goodness, right? And then I got COVID and my body actually did quite well with the COVID, but it built up antibodies to battle it. And the problem was that the medication I was on at the time, a medication called infliximab, which is you go to a hospital and you sit in the PITU clinic and have like 8 hours worth of medication put in through an IV, right? Now, that had been working amazingly, which was what led me to make the TV show I made the last time we were here, Beyond Belief, in 2020, which we talked about. And it got me well enough. But then suddenly, after COVID, that medication stopped working. And when you have to find a new medication, which thankfully the NHS, they put everything into trying to help me find some new medication. But you have to trial something for 3 months before you can write it off. And I can sometimes feel in the first week that it's not working. But then I know it's not working, but I still have to keep trying it for 3 months and going through that toil and pain and discomfort to eventually write it off and then get permission to start another trial.
Torture.
So I trialed medications for over, I'd say, it's about 9 months to a year of trying different medications where they just weren't working. So it was a whole year and also when you take the medications, they have their own side effects. So like I was getting different symptoms and I think I was on a cocktail of medicines at one point where I was taking like 29 tablets a day. And although it eventually started to numb the pain, it definitely made me numb to the world at the same time. I didn't feel like I'd control my own body. And thankfully now I'm down to 2 tablets a day. I don't know if I'll ever get down to 0, but I'll take 2 tablets a day for the rest of my life because I'm feeling a lot again and I'm enjoying so much. I'm enjoying creating magic. I'm definitely not in that place that I was back then. But I think when you combine all those different things, plus with all the medication, there's possibly a bit of, psychosis happening because of all the meds that I was on, because it can't be good for you long term mentally. And the fact that I wasn't able to perform as well, I was not able to perform at full capacity. And the thing that's always lifted me up when I felt down is going out and performing magic.
And potentially a big part of your identity that is then missing. Is that part of it? Because it's been in your life since you were a tiny kid. So then to all of a sudden lose that, was there a sense of who the hell am I without that?
Oh, 1,000,000%. I still definitely have elements of imposter syndrome now. I'm performing again now, but I still think, am I as good as I was? Will people still like what I'm going to do? There's certain limitations I have that I didn't have when I was a bit younger and, first starting out. But I guess that comes with old age as well. I'm getting on a little bit now, so I can't put that all down to the Crohn's disease. But yeah, I think it's scary doing something for over half your life, because I've been doing magic. I was performing as Dynamo since I was like 19 years old. I'm 42 now, so I've been Dynamo longer in my life than I've been Steven in some respects. And then when that like alter ego of me feels like I'm unable to go out and perform as that person, then suddenly who am I? What is my purpose in life if I can't share my magic?
Yeah, that whole period was so interesting. And again, I haven't spoken to you since, you've lost the name Dynamo and you've done this act of burial, which felt very ceremonial watching it. Like it was something, not only that you were making an entertaining TV show and doing something spectacular, but it was needed, that act of ritual to go, that is now dead to me and I'm moving into a new chapter. Does it feel different performing as yourself? Have you lost a suit of armour in terms of losing that alter ego? And what was it? Was there sort of a sense of protection, I guess, with that name and alter ego?
There was definitely, for years, a sense of protection from living behind the mask of Dynamo, so to speak. But at the same time, at the height of it, I feel like it also played a big part in me being scared to perform.
How so?
Because as Dynamo, I could do all these incredible things, impossible things. But yet on the flip side here, as Steven, I found myself in hospital beds, not even able to get out of bed, not even able to do the simplest of tasks. So the oxymoron of, a magician who can't even make himself a cup of tea. Do you know what I mean? I'm from Yorkshire. We love tea. Yorkshire tea, particularly.
That's a big loss.
But for me not to be able to do that, it was super scary, because I'd stay at home. I'd basically become a bit of a recluse. I wouldn't want to walk out on the street in case someone stopped me and says, can you show some magic? Because I'd feel like I wasn't worthy of it. I feel like I wasn't good enough. So it definitely is a scary thing. I think also, it's quite scary sometimes just being yourself.
Yeah.
And
it is, because if someone gives you, and we're all exposed to this to some extent now because of social media, but when you're in the public eye and you're performing or creating whatever it is as yourself, not as an actor, you've got one less layer of skin per se. So if someone says to you, I think you're a piece of shit or you're annoying or whatever, which, I've certainly had all the abuse over the years for decades, you do question yourself. You can't say, but that was just the character, or I could have maybe done that differently. It's like, oh my God, but that's inherently who I am. Do I have to change, or is there something wrong with me? I think it makes you question so much. And I guess with Dynamo, again, you had that suit of armour of, it's a character, it's an alter ego. Whereas now, if someone says something negative towards you, and I'm sure you don't get it that often because what you're doing is, it's showmanship and it's entertainment, but it still hurts that bit more, would you say?
Yeah, because if I'm performing as myself, just as Steven, and don't get me wrong, like Steven, there's always going to be part of me that is the Dynamo character.
Yeah.
A lot of I'd like to think the best parts of Dynamo were actually Steven in the first place, right? But if I'm performing as myself, I'm kind of exposed. I'm out there, and if they have anything negative to say about that performance, they are directly targeting it at Steven. I don't have the name to hide behind. I'm literally having to take it on the chin and hopefully I like to take any negative things and use them to help build character.
So a positive spin on it for sure.
I try. When my nana was alive, she always used to say I had a sunny disposition. So I would always, I always try and, look at the glass as being like half full.
Yeah, I mean, you did this even when you were in hospital. I loved in your new show, Miracles, which me and my kids were completely transfixed by this show and talked about it for weeks afterwards. Some of the magic you're doing in this show is unfathomable. It's just like I don't want to give it away for people that haven't seen, but the end trick that you do with the umbrella, we were just freaked out completely. It was so beautiful, it was so moving. But many of the magic tricks in that show were inspired by you being in so much pain in hospital and looking at the relationship between human beings and pain. And I guess how much of that is mentally ramped up versus physically felt. Do you think, they were incredible tricks where you were sort of testing yourself with levels of pain. Do you think that looking at your illness through the lens of magic has helped you manage the pain that you feel? Is there a way where mentally we can control that relationship we have with physical pain?
I think it's flipping the word pain on its head and just basically, it's not pain, it's something that you can use as an experience and take that into your own life. You can learn from it in a positive way, I think is what I'm trying to say. Right?
Yeah.
I've had lots of negative experiences in my life, as have many people listening, and every day, people are having difficult times. But I think the thing that helps you build strength is getting through those difficult times and being able to look back on them and look at the experiences that you learned and things you took away from it. Some obviously negative things will be things that you think about.
Yeah.
But then the fact that you got through it, like that's an achievement.
It's a fine line, isn't it, between, because I totally do that myself and like to try and think in that mindset when I can. But I think when you've been through something shit, whether it's physically, mentally, circumstantially, you can also fall into the trap of dreading it happening again, especially with ill health, when you know that you may have health challenges for the rest of your life. How do you stop your mind from going to the place of, I cannot endure going through what I went through again if it happens in a year, 2 years? How do you stop yourself from going there?
I can't live in the fear that that's going to be the case. I know it always in the back of my mind might happen, but I have to just try my best to take care of myself and focus my energies on my art. Magic is the way I speak to the world.
Yeah.
So I take everything negative and I write about it in my notebooks, which it's in notebooks that it's not necessarily like a diary. It's my magic books that I write all the different ideas in. And, sometimes by writing about problems, this was actually recommended by my therapist, Edward Sim. He told me to, when you think negative things, rather than just act on them, write them down in your notebook. And sometimes if you look back at the negative time you were going through a week later, you're like, why was I even worried about that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because time is, it is a great healer. I know that's a cliche to say, but it really is for me. And I write these ideas down, but then sometimes I'll start writing writing about a bad day. And then suddenly my mind will open up and it'll give me a new magic idea. But what started off as a passage about a bad day becomes a whole idea for a whole new piece of magic that can be in a new TV show. And then suddenly I'm excited and I'm no longer in that bad place. I'm suddenly in a positive place. And, I guess it's like, I always try and approach my career like a musician, because growing up, the people at the youth club that were around me that inspired me, they were into music and into dance, so they would express themselves through dance and through making songs. And I would kind of take that blueprint, but I would write down my magic ideas are like my song lyrics. And if you look at the artists that we kind of admire possibly the most, especially me anyway, people like Eminem, Amy Winehouse, Linkin Park, like the musicians and the writers of these songs, they often put their pain into the art and made something beautiful from it. Like Amy didn't have an easy life. right? Eminem, well, we know about all of his woes.
Yeah.
So, I think inspired by seeing what they've done and how they've transformed something negative into something positive, that isn't, in one sense, real magic.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's so interesting how pain often connects people much more intensely than, say, joy. And I know joy can create lovely connections and you can eat with people and laugh and have a great time. But often we think that pain's going to equal rejection or being ostracized from other people. But actually, it's so connective. There'll be people listening to this now who will have Crohn's or will have tried to take their own life or have someone in their life that has. And then instantly you've got that connection with them. You've got that common ground where you understand each other and you get each other. And I think obviously that's why those songs and these artists we've talked about resonate, because we're all going, yeah, I felt like that, or I feel it. And the same with your magic. It's not just you're doing a trick that wows people. There's emotion in there. And I think certainly with miracles, you can really tell the depths of that and the fact that you've drawn from these places of pain and discomfort and made something good out of it. It's a really amazing process. I mean, when did you start realizing that magic could be cathartic in that way? Because I'm sure you didn't start with that thought as a kid, like this is going to heal me or solve my problems. You're doing it, you're a showman and you want people to be wowed. But it seems now that it's sort of cutting deeper with you, maybe.
Definitely. I think ultimately you touched on it a little bit there when you talked about how, sometimes the pain can connect deeper with people. And I think it's the fact that we share joy, right? But we don't often share pain. But we all go through pain, and we sometimes think that we're the only ones going through it at the time. So we don't want to burden other people with our problems. So we'll often hide behind fake joy to try and, show a good face in front of people, sharing in the joyous times, but then we go home back to our pain. And I think I've kind of had to accept that, you know what, there's only so much, you can't fake, I couldn't fake it anymore. Do you know what I mean? I was in so much discomfort and I felt so low in my life that I'm like, I can't pretend, and if people don't like the person that's left over, if people ridicule me for feeling weak or feeling, like down at some of these times, then I have to just take that as a reflection on them, not on myself. And I have to focus on just getting myself into a good place where I can't let anything hurt me. And it's not to say that things won't hurt me. It's not to like kind of shield myself too much. I think it's just embracing the fact that sometimes I'm going to have a bad day. I've got Crohn's disease. I've got used to it now. I got diagnosed when I was 14. So I know, like, even with my medication now, I have 5 good days a week and 2 bad days where I'm wiped out because the meds wipe me out. But that's 5 incredible opportunities to do all the things I want to do in life, and 2 days to spend in bed. You know what I mean? Like, win-win.
It's a pretty good balance. But, but that's me being completely reductive because, of course, I'm sure you'd loved 7 days out and about doing your thing. But you've, again, put a positive, or your sunny disposition has allowed you to have that gratitude for the time you have got going out and doing something you love and creating and engaging with people. Do you think you've always been like that? Because, your history, your childhood is well documented. You didn't have the easiest ride. Your dad wasn't about. He was in prison. Your mum had you at a very young age. You've had setbacks or certainly big hurdles and challenges to deal with since you were a tiny kid. And like I said at the start, we've seen you bounce back from things, from big challenges, whether it's health, mental health or otherwise. Is that just your nature that you are able to find this resilience, find this positive spin on things? Or does it take an immense amount of work and courage and, I don't know, just sort of mental flexibility to be able to keep bouncing back?
I think, well, I'm going to start by saying it takes an incredible amount of work. I think to survive anything, to be good at anything, it takes a huge amount of effort, and that can't be undermined at all. But I think if I go right back to the beginning, right, and when I say to the beginning, I mean right back to the beginning, before I was even born, right, I was born 6 weeks premature, right, and also my mum, she fell pregnant with me at 16, right, she had me at 17, but like, I definitely was an accident, right, so I wasn't meant to be here, and then, you know, from the beginning, I came out into the world way too early, right? And then I was on, you know, like life support, and that, you know, they wasn't sure if I was going to survive. And then I lived on, you know, we lived on a council estate in Bradford. We lived on multiple council estates. We were council estate hoppers. You know, we tried them all out. You know, I've got friends in all different areas. And like trying to, you know, my mum was, you know, my dad was away in his, you know, serving His Majesty's pleasure. And my mum was looking after me on her own. She was also trying to find herself in the world, and we were, you know, not in the best surroundings. So from the off, like, it was a challenge. You know, I was born into a struggle. And also my mum is white, she's English, right? And my father was Pathan. So like growing up, think about this, in Bradford City, back in the 80s,
Yeah.
right? When the world wasn't as forgiving or as accepting as it is today, you know, that was a difficult challenge in itself. So from the off, I was faced with adversity, but I didn't know that it was adversity because I was too young.
You're just a kid,
right?
It's your normal.
So it became my normal, and then I decided, you know, this was, I don't know if this was, it seemed like a good idea now, but back then, you know, of all the things that I wanted to try and make it as, you know, a magician, you know, like I can count on my hand the number of magicians that have become, you know, like super successful that we all know, right? So to even think that that's a way that I'm going to make it off the estate, that I'm going to make it, you know,
it's 1 in a billion.
Everything. So, you know, I think that I was born to do this in one way, shape or form, and I was born to face the struggle. But I feel like now when I do it, I used to perform for me, right? Now I feel like I perform to show other people that we can do impossible things. We can do a lot more than we give ourselves credit for. You know, there'll be a kid on an estate now who might see my story and decide that, you know, they've got a passion for something and they're going to go for it. You know, there'll be somebody, like say, listening that might also have Crohn's disease who don't know whether they think they can make it. I'm sitting here saying that you can. You know, I've had it for a long time now, and I've found a way to deal with it. And yeah, sometimes you get bad days, but life's ups and downs.
Yeah.
You know, and if you had just ups all the time, that'd be a very hard life to live up to. And I feel like I think that's why I feel that when I was performing as Dynamo and I was on that ascension, and it was, you know, going from strength to strength to strength, and we were doing all these incredible things, you know, touring the world, making TV shows, winning awards. Like, it almost was like too much goodness that I just wasn't used to.
Wow, how interesting. So how are you processing that? Because that is interesting. That was it a sense of I don't deserve this, or what's the catch here? When am I going to get caught out? You know, because if you're not used to that, a run of luck, a run of ascension, that is uncomfortable to a degree because you're used to the hustle and the fight and what challenge am I dealing with next. But as you say, I sort of met you back in the day. I remember when you used to come to my friend Kai's flat and do magic, back in the day. And then to watch you blow up into this global superstar, and rightly so because of your talent and your drive. But I can imagine for you then, having not been used to a run of good luck, that is discombobulating. Like, what's going on here? How did you mentally deal with that and process it?
I think I just kept trying to ride the wave, but it got to the point where I was just internalizing all these thoughts where I didn't feel like I belonged in that world. You know, I was trying to fake it, but it just basically kind of boiled over to the point where I was self-imploding, and I was, the thing I loved performing, I was scared to do it. You know, I was scared to go on stage. You know what I mean?
Because of the pressure.
Yeah, Like, I felt like I'd found myself in this incredibly fortunate position, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I didn't have a struggle or something to channel my energy into trying to figure out. And I felt like, well, I'm so lucky to be here. I can't have any complaints. I can't complain about anything in my life, and I can't share that with people because they'll look at my life and think, well, look at everything you've got, and rightly so. I had so much fortune on my side at that peak of that time in my life. So I do actually look at the reset, I'm going to call it, the kind of hitting rock bottom as possibly the best thing that ever happened to me, because when I was going through it, I felt like my entire life was being taken from me. Everything I lived for was being taken from me, and I thought, what's the point in being here anymore? Whereas now I look at it, well, how many people get the chance to have two lives in one lifetime? And I've been channeling my energy, recently, like my last few years, I feel like I've come alive again. I feel like the magic I'm creating, it's not just magic just to entertain people. It's magic that definitely for me, it has a sense of purpose. I feel like I'm doing something with it that is actually it's bigger than just me. Like, just, for example, right, there's a young boy in the show Miracles that we film with in my hometown of Bradford, got a young guy called Travis, and he's 9 years old, or he's 10 now, but he was 9 years old, and he had an interaction with a homeless man. And then he went home, told his dad, I want to sell all my toys and I want to open up a food bank. And he set up that food bank a couple of years ago now, and it's helping like 200 people a month.
So I love that story so much.
That's incredible, right? And, I went on, like, when I was at my lowest, when I was like finding my way back, my therapist told me to, like, read the 12 Steps book. Now, I've never drank alcohol or anything, or done drugs apart from what the doctors gave me. I mean, to be fair, I've done a lot because 29 times
You've done
a day,
shitloads of drugs.
right? But, like...
Legal ones.
Yes, so then my doctor recommended reading the 12 Steps book, and it's loads of short stories. It's a lot more than this, but it's a load of short stories, ultimately, that show people's struggles and how they overcoming their addictions, and the different stages they've had to go through to get out the other side. And it's an ongoing thing. So, even when you go through it, like it's a lifelong pursuit. And reading the stories in the 12 Steps inspired me to want to read stories of other people and how they deal with their own problems and how they take the negative things that life throws at them and flip it into a positive. And that ended up, that's why I went down the rabbit hole of finding all these incredible people that I wanted to film with. Some of them in Dynamo is Dead, I filmed with certain celebrities, like Demi Lovato, like Coldplay, like people that you don't always know that they're having bad times.
Yeah, I love that Demi Lovato chat you had with her. That was deep. It's amazing. And she just opened up about so much to you. It's incredible.
Yeah, it was everybody on that show and everybody I've filmed with over the last few years, they've been so open and it's just been so amazing, hearing that people are going through stuff, but also hearing how they deal with it in their own special way, because I think that just gives everyone hope that we can all get through this. So actually it's quite crazy because you just reminded me, Dynamo is Dead goes out in America today.
Oh, nice.
So people are going to get to see that Demi Lovato clip in America, which is quite exciting, on Fuse TV out there, which is cool. But yeah, anyway, I'm going back to my point. So I came across, obviously, Travis's story, and, I wanted to go film with him. And even better that it was from my hometown. It showed me, if that's a 10-year-old helping the world like that, then it makes me feel like the world is in safe hands for the future with the next generation of people coming through, right? But after filming with him, I was doing an interview for a newspaper. And, I was doing an interview for The Big Issue. And I mentioned Travis. And then a week later, they reached out to me and said, we want to contact Travis. And they've made him one of the 100 like young people to kind of watch who's changing
That's
the world
so
for the good.
great.
And for me, like that there is the epitome of the magic actually doing something that is way bigger than any magic trick I could do. You know, that's going to help Travis help even more people than he's helping. And it all started with me wanting to show him a simple trick. Do you know what I mean?
It's so beautiful. What a lovely chain of events. It's so amazing. And I love this. I love hearing any stories like this where people have had a reset, like you've pressed game over on a computer game and you're going back to the fucking start. And, you know, I've definitely done that. I think when you get to a point where nothing makes sense anymore, and like you say, you know, you've maybe had a couple of these moments, you know, you've got your rock bottom moment, but you've also got, oh my God, I'm so famous and successful, nothing quite makes sense anymore. Why am I doing it? Who am I? And that sort of existential, you know, craze that we can get into mentally of not quite knowing what our purpose is and where we're going. And it's only when you press reset, which usually is a rock bottom, certainly was for me, was for you, that you have to make up the rules again. Because I think we all create these rules from childhood where we go, this makes you a good person, or that makes you a bad person, or this works, that doesn't work, and this is how I like things to be. And that becomes, perhaps as you get older, more rigid, and the margins move into a narrower space. So you're just living in this one way according to how you think. And when you press reset, it just all blows up. And you're like, oh God. I mean, my old framework personally made no sense to me anymore. I was trying to keep everything under control, trying to be perfect, please everybody, blah, blah, blah. And then you go, what the fuck am I doing? And actually, when you press reset and blow it all up, you go, right, where could I be a bit more flexible? How could I think a bit differently? How could I see the world and my place in it in a completely different way? And I think if you get a conclusion of purpose out of that, even better. Like, how amazing that you're still doing the thing you love. You're still passionate about the art of magic, but there's this undercurrent of purpose there where you can, like you say, you've just set off this beautiful chain of events to change lives. It's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so fortunate to find myself in this place, which is almost like a strange notion, thinking where it came from. If you'd have asked this conversation like a few years ago, I wouldn't have felt fortunate at all. But I wouldn't have got to this place without going through what I went through.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's kind of, it's really cool now because I'm writing magic ideas on a day-to-day basis. You know, I'm coming up with so much new material, but I'm getting to look at it and share it through a different perspective than I ever did when I was younger. And I think that's the thing as well. Like, it's a great thing about magic is that magic brings people back to that childlike state of mind when they believe anything is possible.
It's awe, isn't it? We never feel awe as an adult. And then you see magic and go, I'm in awe. It's like proper awestruck.
Yeah. And I think that when you're younger, you believe you can do anything. You don't follow the parameters that you have as an adult. And I think that's why it becomes a bit scarier. Because when you're a kid, you'll talk about anything.
Yeah.
You'll literally, nothing's a secret. And you believe that anything's possible. You literally just living life, having fun, more often than not.
Yeah.
Right? So then when you get older, you have all these parameters that society has kind of put us on, that you have to live within the bounds of these confines. And some of them are rightfully there to help the world be better, right? But then there's certain parameters that make you as a person feel locked in, feel trapped. And I think that when I've done my reset, it's allowed me to kind of come back to magic with a sense of play, with a sense of fun. Me starting, you know, almost starting from scratch. And I started a brand new Instagram account, you know, from zero. And it's been really fun building that up again, because it's called Dynamo is Dead, which is quite funny. But yeah, literally, I've been building that up. But I haven't made content worrying about will they like this? Well, I've just been like, all right, this will be a cool thing to make.
Yeah.
I'm just going to make it. I'm just putting it out into the world, share what I love. And it's been resonating with people. So that was almost like a start. I've kind of got back to just doing the things I like to do for the fun of it. And now I'm kind of, I'm in the process of writing a live show, which is in some ways the first time I'm doing a Steven Frayne magic show.
Wow. And how do you feel about that?
It's kind of scary. I'm a little nervous, apprehensive about some of the things I want to share, but I think because I'm nervous of them, I definitely should share them, because it's often the things that you're scared to put out into the world. They're the things that are going to move people. They're the things that are going to have the most impact. And I've got so many incredible magical stories that I want to, and pieces of magic that I want to share in this. And I feel like, my grandpa got me into magic. He always called me Stephen, right? And he passed away in 2012. And my nana passed away in 2021. So I feel like this is a chance to show the world the magic of Stephen that they used to get to see. Because back when I did magic just for them, I had the best time of my life. Yeah. It didn't matter that I lived on a council estate. It didn't matter that we were poor. Like, I had my grandparents there as the best audience I've ever performed for, and they helped to nurture that talent. They showed me that, I could do anything. And I think I've been reminded of that over the last few years. It's weird. I feel like, it's going to sound really hokey, but when I've been writing these shows, I often stay up till like 6 a.m. writing. I'm a night owl, right?
I'm the direct opposite of that. I'm literally like, get me in bed by 9:30.
Yeah, you have children, so you have responsibilities.
Correct,
So I think when I have kids in the future,
but this is very common that musicians, creative people can draw a lot of amazingness from whatever you believe that creative source is in the dark hours when everyone else is asleep. It's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
Definitely a thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I am fortunate enough to have children in the future, they're either going to have to be night owls like me. Touch wood, hopefully they are. Although my wife gets up in the day, so like we could tag team. Yeah. Right. Or I'm just going to have to get a whole new reset on life and start getting up really early.
You might have to do that.
And go to bed really early.
Yeah.
But currently, I stay up all night writing ideas, and I'm often on my own. I've got a little magic studio, right? But I do feel like I've been like trying to write this show, and I feel like when I'm getting to a point where I'm like, I can't seem to wrap my head around how I'm going to put this piece of magic in and tell this story and do this. But then somehow it just comes together, and I feel like my nan and grandpa are somehow helping me, and that's going to sound really hokey.
Not at all. I think that's so nice. It's so lovely, and that version of yourself where there was that freedom to experiment without that pressure, and you knew that you had this talent, and you were working with it. Like you said a moment ago, it's not even 1 in a million. It's 1 in probably a billion that you are then going to become one of the most successful magicians on the planet. Like, that is a far out idea for a small kid who's growing up on a council estate that they're going to do that. Obviously, you need proper talent. And you need discipline with magic, because I'm sure that is a huge percentage of how you end up being so good, is just practicing and practicing and practicing. But the other key ingredient is drive. You have got to have such drive and such ambition. And you were, back in the day, probably around the time I first met you, hustling, getting yourself in backstage at gigs, making sure you were meeting the right people, doing magic for people, even if they weren't necessarily interested in watching it. Where do you think that comes from, that level of drive and the feeling that you're not going to give up?
I think that comes from growing up on the council estate, to be honest. I wasn't a big kid, and I would get, I was the easy target for the bullies. So every time I left my house, I was having to hustle in one way, shape or form to survive that day. I didn't want to go to school and get beat up. I wanted to go to school and learn. But more often than not, in order to get to learning, I had to navigate not getting battered at school. So I think the drive to want to improve myself each day by getting to class, by not, it was scary going to school for me. But I think that the fear can go one or two ways. You can run towards it, and the fear of looking at the other side, thinking, well, if I don't get these lessons in life, the lessons from school that I'm going to need for my future, then that's a more scary thought than getting punched in the face, right? Now, getting punched in the face really hurts, right? But I was willing to put myself in that firing line in order to get the education that I needed. And I think that same ethos is something I've always taken with me. Now, like, I face a lot of challenges trying to navigate the industry that we work in, the entertainment industry. But I can safely say that when I'm trying to perform my magic in this modern world right now, it's very unlikely that someone's going to punch me in the face because I want to show them a magic trick.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So when I look at it like that, I'm just like, well, you know what? Like, what have I got to lose?
Yeah. But it's extraordinary that you even had that mindset as a kid, because I think a lot of times, especially when it comes to bullying, the natural reaction is, I'm just going to hide in my shell. I don't want to go out. I don't want to go to school. I'll be mute. I won't say anything, because there's so much fear around being attacked for who you are or what you represent in the other person's eyes, whatever it might be. Why do you think you had that mindset that you could take the other route and not hide and shy away? You actually did directly the opposite and became someone that wanted to perform and show a talent to people around them.
I think, looking back at it now, I actually would say it comes from my mum. But I've only realised that in the last few years. And the reason I realised it is because we were filming some interviews that were going to be in one of the TV shows in Dynamo is Dead, right? Because I buried myself alive on the TV show, so they wanted to interview my family just in case anything went wrong, which is kind of a morbid thing when you think about it.
It's pretty full on.
But it shows the realities of the incredible stunt the challenge I was going to put myself under, and I watched some of the interviews back. Now, we didn't end up using them in the show, right? But I watched some of the rushes back in the edit suite. And my mum was talking about some of the things that she'd overcome in her life. But I didn't even... Well, I kind of knew, but I didn't really appreciate at the time. Because I think growing up, I possibly... I felt like my mum had made certain decisions in her life that had put us in a position that we were in. Like my dad, when she was dating him, when she was younger, he wasn't always the nicest guy, right? But she kept going back to him. You know what I mean? And I think I always didn't understand why she would put herself in that situation. So I kind of not resented, but I just didn't understand it from that perspective, and I didn't necessarily give her the credit that she maybe deserved. Because looking back now, it's very hard to walk away from an abusive relationship. It's very hard to change your circumstances. If you're trying to figure out how to make ends meet, pay to get food to feed your child whilst your partner is in jail, whilst half of your family don't want to be in your life anymore because of the decisions you've made, then you have to find a way. You have to become resilient. And hearing some of the stories, but from almost like a bird's eye view of looking at my mum, looking at that interview that she gave, it changed my whole perception. I have a whole new kind of understanding and respect and admiration for what she went through to bring me into this world, to get me to survive basically. And I think looking back now, I have to give a big part of my resilience to my mum.
Yeah. God, how fascinating. We should all potentially interview our parents to try sort of get that story. Because I think when you're growing up, no matter what the circumstance, you just think, my mum's my mum, or my dad's my dad, or whoever's brought you up. And I guess you don't necessarily, when you're a kid, certainly see them as a human. They're just your mum and your dad. And then maybe the age we're at now, or maybe a bit younger, you can start to go, God, what have they gone through? Why did they make those decisions? What have they been through to inform who they are today? And how's that impacted how I've been parented? And I guess it's never too late to do that, to have that chat.
I mean, it's so easy.
Interesting.
So easy as a kid to be like, oh, Mum, why can't I have the trainers that my friends got? Why can't I get those toys? Why can't we go on that school trip? You don't understand what they're going through to even make ends meet, let alone be able to pay for the luxuries that we all can maybe take for granted.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's been really good for me, kind of reflecting back on life. Like feeling like I lost it, and then reflecting back on what it was that I would have been losing. Has given me so many reasons to want to stay here and to want to take these stories and channel them into my magic so I can share things in new ways. We talked about like, how do I feel about writing this Steven Frayne show? And it's scary, but it's also really, really exciting. I'm performing in like an intimate venue. It's like 200 people per show, called Underbelly Boulevard in Soho. I'm just doing shows in London, 47 shows. I know a lot of my fans were a bit gutted that I'm not going further afield, but there is actually a valid reason. This is my first long run of shows since I got better. So I plan to go and travel the rest of the world and, take magic all over the place with this show. But to begin with, I wanted to have it close to home and close to my hospital and close to my specialist, so that just, it's a long run of shows, 47 shows in a row. It's not something I know how well my body's going to cope with it. I've done longer runs in the past. My last big tour did 111 shows. So I wanted to kind of ease myself back into it and, and perform close to home and just really, really hone the show, really make it an incredible experience for the people coming to see it. So by the time I do take it on the road and do bring it to a city near you, you're going to get the best experience ever because I've been able to make the show from my home comforts.
Yeah, and good for you. Like, you're at an age and have the long history of experience to know this is going to ensure that I not only perform the best, but that most importantly, your health is prioritised. And I think when you're younger and you're hungry and you're on the ascent, you don't bear those things in mind. You just want to do the best, and that's when you do end up getting ill or whatever. So I think it's fucking brilliant that you've made that decision for you and your health. I'm coming to the show, and
amazing!
I cannot wait.
You got to bring the kids.
I'm bringing the kids. Yeah. We cannot wait. I'd love to finish by asking you, Steven, where is your happy place?
My happy place is it's got to be performing magic. Sometimes it's felt like a tricky place to get to, pun intended, I guess. Mm-hmm. But yeah, performing magic, and right now performing magic as myself, as Steven Frayne, up close and magical.
Yeah, well, I'm so happy that you're doing what you love and that your health is back on track, and I can't wait to see the live show. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me.